I don't know, Mike, but Jake Ettinger, District Representative for Senator Ben Allen.
Austin Sear, Supervisor Horvath, Deputy Director of Community Affairs and future alternate.
Jake. Sure.
In Zoom, Zoom have one. Better. Just based on our screen, Vice Mayor Friedman.
Yes, Lester Friedman, Beverly Hills, and if everybody could speak into the microphones, it's a little garbled.
Maybe not. Okay. Yes. But we can. All right.
Corey Plank, City of West Hollywood,
Corey Plank,
Strategic Initiatives Manager.
You're muted also.
Corey Plank, City of West Hollywood,
No,
Strategic
maybe sorry.
Initiatives Manager.
Is it our problem or is it their problem?
No, we can hear them on Zoom.
But we can't hear them here. What does that mean? This is part of the extraterrestrial exercise. While we figure that out,
We can also.
okay, you don't have a microphone, so shout. Or actually, well, you don't have to get up unless you want.
Hi, I'm the left one. I'm the supervisor of that's office.
Great, welcome.
I'm Troy Angelo, Culver City Advanced Planning.
Thank you, sir.
Clarissa Hogan, I'm Culver City Transportation Department.
Great, thank you.
Cindy Owens, City of Beverly Hills, School Affairs Manager.
Thank you. The back row there.
Eric Rodriguez, scanning at LA County Government Affairs Officer.
Fantastic.
Karen Swift, Cedar Sinai.
Thank you.
Eric Bagwell, Economic West.
See that.
Daniel Lopez with Economic West.
Good.
So I think that's good reporting.
Okay. Are we fixed our Zoom?
I don't believe so. There's no way to get the audio from Zoom to broadcast through this.
Can we do it on a laptop? And put a mic-
Can't you use one of these mics? If you have sound over there, you just move this mic next to your sound.
Okay. Very good. All right, let's try again. Vice Mayor Friedman.
Yes, Lester Friedman, City of Beverly Hills, and if everyone could speak into the mic, it's hard to hear unless you're directly at the mic.
Okay. Thank you. Jason Klieger.
Jason Klieger, Mobility Manager for the City of Santa Monica.
Thank you, sir. Cora Blank, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Corey Plank, Strategic Initiatives Manager for the City of West Hollywood.
Jared Thompson, I see you there.
Hi, Joe Thompson, Council District 5, City of Los Angeles.
Great. Mr. Feinberg.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Feinberg. I'm the Transportation Government Relations Officer for the City of Santa Monica Transportation Department.
Okay. Tony, can you hear me? Okay. I think that's everybody. So with that, with those introductions, we've identified the voting members. We call the meeting to order. And our first action item is the meeting note from our last meeting, the February 9th meeting. Does anybody have anything they'd like to amend, defend, or advance to those? And if not, I'll take a motion to accept as written.
So moved.
Second. Great. Roll call, please.
City of Beverly Hills,
Yes.
City of Culver City,
Aye.
City of Santa Monica,
Yes.
and City of West Hollywood.
Great, thank you. Item D3B, this is the Metro West Side Central Service Council Representative. I'm gonna turn that to you.
Okay, thank you, Council Cole. This is our Metro Service Council. The purpose of these are to improve bus service and promote service coordination with the municipal transit. We have a representative to the Metro West Side Central Service Council. David Feinberg, then our representative, his term is up. He's expressed interest to continue in that manner. You'll see on page 9 of your agenda packet. He's asking for reappointment as our representative, and we are recommending.
Great. And is there anybody who would like to discuss that?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, roll call please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City.
Aye.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Great. Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Feinberg.
Thank you.
We move on to item C. This is the Sub-Regional Affordable Housing Funding Program Study Presentation. I'm going to turn this back to you guys.
Yeah, we have Katie introduce this item, and then we have a brief presentation.
Yes, we've been retained a couple of different equitable requests to conduct a sub-regional affordable housing funding program study. And we have 2 representatives here who introduce themselves and do a presentation. It'll be about 15 minutes, so there's a lot covered, and we'll spend another 15 minutes to have a board discussion.
And it bears noting that this study was funded through SCAG's funds that are coming out from the state of California. This is our opportunity to evaluate what are potential ways of collaborating with the needs of this area for funding.
Well, nice to meet you. Nice to meet everyone. Thanks for having us. So, sorry, right here. I just want to make sure that the audience on 16 here.
Yeah, just directly.
Okay. It's good to be here. Thank you for having us. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Eric Bagel again. My background is affordable housing finance. I've been doing housing finance across the West Coast and working on a lot of affordable housing projects.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Throughout the West Coast, and so we've been helping to work with that. My colleague. My name is Emmanuel Lopez. I'm an associate at Economic West, primarily focusing on housing and real estate analytics, as well as affordable housing development.
Another microphone, thank you.
Much better.
Okay, everyone, can you hear me better?
Finish the rest.
Great.
So we have the presentation. If we can move on to the next slide. So this project is a part of a SCAG grant for the REAP program, where we are working through the process of identifying what are the steps to implement a affordable housing regional trust fund in the West Side City's health government. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so part of the scope of this work is to kind of understand the housing context that West Side City COG works in, and to identify the funds that both state and federal opportunities can be granted to the city and cities in the West Side City COG, as well as kind of evaluating the regional funding and financing strategies that can take place to make this implementation program successful. Next slide, please. So part of our goal in understanding the housing context of the region was to kind of look at what was happening on the ground. And so we took annual progress report data from the 4 cities in the West Side Cities COG from 2018 and 2021, and analyzed the number of units that were being permitted for construction for both market rates and rental development. And we found that in this 4-year period, there were 423 affordable units and around 1,200 to 1,300 market rate units permitted. So this number helps us establish kind of an average for all 4 years, so we could project what needed to be constructed for the region's 6th cycle agreement, which is a regional housing needs allocation. Next slide, please. So on average, we have about 26 units being permitted per year, right? Throughout, we said with between 2023 and 2031, this means that you would essentially be constructing around 200 affordable units if we kept to that business as usual mean. But the region is being required to construct 9,621 units by 2031. So essentially, if we start off at 2023, we would need to be doubling the rates of production every single year for the next 8 years to be able to satisfy that housing needs allocation. So within the city, or within the city at a jurisdictional level, a combination of zoning changes, staff capacity building, as well as innovative funding strategies are needed to be able to increase at that rate. But most importantly, a kind of a regional approach is really going to be helping us to find land and leveraging funding that we think is kind of the most important step to take in this process. Next slide, please. Throughout our investigation, we've seen that there are many regional entities that are forming to address kind of the housing shortage in the county and the greater region of Los Angeles. And from this, we've seen the formation of regional housing trusts to help smaller jurisdictions reach their green targets, which in the next slide we'll go over how that actually functions. And we've seen the establishment of programs and tools to increase production and capacity building. So for some context about how regional entities can help with the process of construction, the Orange County Regional Housing Trust Fund has produced around 1,300 permanent supported housing units since 2018, and 608 of those are currently under construction. We see that the San Gabriel Valley Housing Trust has nearly 1,000 units in its pipeline that it's committing funds to, and the Gateway Cities Trust Fund has identified 4,000 units in its pipeline. None of those are yet in construction, but those units do need gap financing to be able to proceed. So additionally, the Gateway Cities product is also using local solutions to address homelessness, such as matching funding for state and local housing funds. So throughout the process of developing these regional housing trusts, we see that the primary mechanism for success in this is having someone kind of at the state and federal level to champion the leveraging of getting more funds. And so I'll pass this off to Eric to be able to continue this.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to build up what my colleague was saying, the way we've in the research we've done, what we've heard from a lot of the regional trust funds that have been established is they've gone through the process of establishing joint powers authorities to establish those regional trust funds. And where they've been successful in making that happen is through legislative action, right? That's part of the process for creating a joint powers authority in the state of California. And as a part of that legislation, they've been able to receive federal and state earmarks. So as you see on the left, San Gabriel Valley was successful in receiving a $45 million earmark. And then most recent JPA with the Glendale, Pasadena, Burbank has been successful in leveraging $23 million in state and federal earmarks. So what are they doing with all this money? Glendale, Pasadena is somewhat new to this process, and so what their strategies are and their approaches as regional trust fund are not yet determined. But the San Gabriel Valley Regional Trust Fund is really putting a lot of good money to use on a lot of housing affordability issues. So working on projects ranging from senior housing to ADU construction to just general gap financing for local massive tax credit projects. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, leverage is a big part of this, right? And this is why a lot of local jurisdictions are coming together to create regional trust funds, right? The whole idea is that the states are creating tons and tons of money and sources available to be able to facilitate affordable housing development in communities across the state. And three important funding sources that we've identified are the local housing trust fund program. So this is a program set up by the state to basically help provide seed funding for any housing trust funds that are being established, whether that's local or regional. And the maximum award for that for any jurisdiction is $5 million. But what this requires is a match, right? So any local housing trust fund needs to provide also $5 million to receive that maximum award. Similarly, the permanent local housing allocation program, which is also another state source, which is helping to fund a variety of affordable housing needs, is a funding source that's provided automatically based on the community development block grant criteria to larger jurisdictions, but smaller jurisdictions such as Beverly Hills, Culver City, and West Hollywood have the opportunity to apply for grants to help bring in additional money for the funding of affordable housing development in those communities. So these are two really important sources, and similar to the local housing trust fund, match is required for the 5 million maximum award on the urban local housing allocation. The last one is the Home Investment Partnerships Program. This is a federal program, but this one specifically is set up for smaller jurisdictions that don't automatically receive a housing allocation fund from HUD. So this is a great opportunity for a lot of jurisdictions. More to these other two sources I mentioned, there's a match that's required. So this one requires 25 cents on the dollar. So if you're going to maximize your reward of 7 million, you need roughly $2 million match to get that and bring in those funds to your jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, leveraging those matching sources for a housing trust fund is super critical to increase production, but also we've identified a whole host, as you can see on the left, of project-specific funding sources that individual developers, nonprofit or for-profit, who are committed to affordable housing development can pursue in order to help facilitate more production. As you can see, this is a complex environment. This requires a lot of skill. This requires a lot of staff capacity to be able to pursue all of these funding sources that have been created at the state, federal, and local levels. So I would say, one thing that's super important here is to keep in mind that because of the complex environment that's been created, there is additional capacity that's needed both for local jurisdictions to help facilitate development, as well as developers. If you put yourself in the shoes of a affordable housing provider, they usually are operating on very small amounts of money. They're usually working on one project a year and don't have capacity to think about or even consider a lot of the funding sources that have been created at the state, federal, and local levels. So some sort of technical assistance is super critical to increase production within the subregion here. Next slide, please. And as part of our research, we also looked at what the local jurisdictions within this COG are currently doing to help fund affordable housing. So we've noticed that there are basically 4 different sources of revenues that all the jurisdictions are working on, and to bring in funding for affordable housing projects within the jurisdictions. And these usually come down to linkage fees, sales and use taxes. 3 of the jurisdictions have inclusionary fee rules that where if you're creating a market rate development and not providing inclusionary units, you can pay a fee that which can go into a fund to help affordable housing development elsewhere. And then all the jurisdictions are providing some general funds to individual projects to help increase production in their geographic boundaries. So these are, I think, one thing we want to really emphasize here is that in order to compete for the main source for affordable housing production, that's the low housing tax credit, the state essentially is awarding more points to those jurisdictions that are contributing some local matching funds to those projects. So if the intention is to increase production, you have to have a source at the local level to be able to compete for those very scarce tax credits that the state is allocating. So I think one thing that's potential here, if the COG and the members are considering a regional fund, there is potential to bring some of these resources that currently exist within the COG, right, to help facilitate more production and to leverage those matching sources that have been created at the state level to help bring more dollars to this effort. Next slide, please. So as part of this project, we also wanted to look at what are sort of site, physical, and financial challenges of developing affordable housing within these 4 cities. And so I think one thing we've identified as part of this process is zoning changes dramatically across the 4 jurisdictions. There's very different ordinances that have been created, as well as bonus programs and things like that exist for different types of housing development that within these jurisdictions. So you can see here, the unit varieties on these. 3 of these are publicly owned sites currently owned by the cities. Beverly Hills site is not. We were able to identify an adequate size city-owned site within the city of Beverly Hills that could facilitate affordable housing development. As you can see, the unit counts can vary dramatically based on what zoning currently allows in the jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So on the financing side, we looked at how feasible these would be as individual tax credit projects. So you'll see the top line is showing those projects that are feasible, and the bottom line is showing those ones that are currently feasible. That means they need gap financing to make those projects financially viable. So one thing really super important to note: if the land is free, so if the city owns the land and is willing to dedicate that land for housing development, and they were able to receive a 9% tax credit award, as well as what we call the difficult to develop area basis boost, which is basically saying HUD every year basically says within any jurisdiction, if you are a difficult to develop area, you can receive more tax credits than an area that is not in a difficult to develop area. That means more money can go to projects than a state level source, right? And so what we see is if land is free, those projects are viable without any additional funding from state or local governments to help contribute to make the project work. But as we know, most of the time land is not free. So can I move the next slide, please? We've looked into some data, just looking at recent transactions within the COG, and we've noticed that land transactions for developable land are about $482 per square foot. So if you think about a half an acre site, that's about $10 million in terms of market rate prices for land, which is a huge challenge. Most affordable housing developers are small; they do not have a lot of resources to help acquire land up front and to pay those the mortgage on that land while they're waiting for a tax code award is very hard. And so a lot of jurisdictions are trying to solve this problem, right? So a couple sources we see here is in LA County and San Gabriel Valley create something called a revolving loan fund. And what that does is help provide up to 100% of loan to value on acquisition of land, helps you to acquire that land until you wait for that permanent source of financing to pay for it. And that what that does is allows housing developers to compete. And so this is a source that a lot of local jurisdictions are really looking at and creating to try and help facilitate more competition for affordable housing development within their jurisdictions. And lastly, one thing that can really affect price is zoning, right? If you do not allow affordable housing development on the sites or any housing development sites, then the land will be worth what a commercial project is worth, right? If you think of a retail project, the land is usually less valuable than a higher multifamily project, right? And so zoning can really facilitate the value of the land in a lot of ways. So thinking about the zoning for all these jurisdictions is super critical in terms of helping facilitate more housing production. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate some of the findings we've had, important to leverage all the sources that we've identified in the state. That is super critical to help facilitate more production. Competing for LIHTC again is requires some sort of local funding sources to help make that move forward and increase production. Gap financing, super important to help facilitate more development. Zoning can be something that we can all think about to help facilitate more opportunity sites for housing development. And then again, lastly, providing that technical assistance is something that's super needed for both small jurisdictions who have limited staff capacity and the developers who have limited capacity as well. Next slide. So our recommendations based on the study are to go about looking into establishing a regional trust fund. I think this is something we've seen other jurisdictions have been very successful at. And a big part of that process is to create the JPA, to create that opportunity to, if the funds exist for any earmark, to help capitalize the fund. Work with the jurisdiction, see who wants to be a member of this, see who is willing to contribute ongoing forms of revenue to this fund. And what we've seen based on those two funding sources, the PLHA and LHCF funding sources, if there's 1.25 million annual contributions, you could have leverage about $10 million in state sources just from those two sources if you receive the maximum award. So something to look into as part of this as our recommendation. And after that, you really need to think about turning the fund design and a management structure. This can be done through a 2.0 funding source. And then think about adopting some zoning or uniform zoning codes to help facilitate more development in affordable housing across the region. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think that's your last slide.
That was it, yeah. I just wanted to see if there's any questions for you all in terms of what we've done.
So I'm just going to underscore the main point of this is that in order for our region to be able to overcome the extraordinarily high land costs of our subregion, the recommendation is to explore the formation of a regional housing trust fund. Two other COGs have done it to great effect and great leverage. And even Northwest has done a good job showing how much we can leverage, even up to 1 to 5 times what we've been able to receive. So there's a possibility, and our recommendation is that the board consider exploring that and sending us off to go forward and so take a look at what it would take to establish that.
Great, thank you. We'll go around and take questions and comments, I suppose. I would point out that, and maybe true for the rest of the cities also, we're actually in the middle of a discussion of the 200+ unit senior affordable housing project, which you guys seem to have missed. I don't know other cities have similar things.
I think they only went to 2021, looking at your data.
Yeah, so that's correct. That's the only permit that we've got up in the country.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. There may be, only to say there may be other things out there that add to this. Why don't we just start with our host, Culver City. Any questions, comments?
I have a question. I don't know if I heard correctly, but did you say that if land use retail land is worth less than residential?
For multifamily, if you're considering a higher density multifamily project compared to lower rise retail, typically we'll see that those tend to be more valuable and are willing to pay more for the land.
And we have the opposite experience. The commercial pays more for the land. Reason being, commercial is cheaper to build than a residential, and they can also get higher rent, so they win. Less construction cost, higher rent, so that's what we are finding.
Absolutely, and I would say it's place specific, right? Not all retail is equal. Some places have lower value retail, some places have higher value retail, so that can affect land prices as well.
Okay, but other than that, I think that we should pursue this.
Thank you, sir. Santa Monica?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. One question I have is what other subdivisions are you working with? You said San Diego Valley or?
We interviewed San Diego Valley to learn more about the way they've structured their regional housing trust fund and how they've aligned it with their COG. But we're not working directly with any other COGs at the moment. There are some ones in the pipeline. I know South Bay, I believe, is up in various considering this as well. So
okay, that's great to know. So there isn't a contract that you have right now with the existing COG.
We are signing a contract not with the COG, but we're working with the county of Fresno coming up to do a similar study.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I think this is a great idea. Anything we can do, leverage sort of, our collective effort to create more housing. I think it's going to be good.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question as well.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
So San Monica already has an affordable housing trust fund, and there's a lot of staff as well that manage it and help leverage the funds in the way they can describe it if we need it. I mean, how would this play out for a city like ours that already has a lot of that infrastructure in place, and would there not be something duplicative?
Yeah, I would say that's one thing we did discover. San Monica is doing a lot because it's a larger city than other jurisdictions in this COG. But I will add that land is scarce. And if there's not a lot of land available currently in Santa Monica, there may be opportunities elsewhere. So having that regional approach will be able to facilitate more production in the region, which is needed everywhere. And we all know that, we recognize that housing is not necessarily just jurisdictional based. People choose housing as a regional, right? They think about where they work, they think about what amenities they want around them in terms of how they live. And so if we need to think about this more from the regional standpoint, I think that help increase production and facilitate more housing opportunities for people.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious if we're sharing the funding for this, are we sharing the credit for the arena allocation?
That's the question.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, that's a question.
Apparently not well. That would change.
But I will say that the state is incentivizing this regional approach through how to score for the funding sources that they're providing for matching, like the local housing trust fund. And so my understanding would be that since they're scoring higher for these regional approaches, they might want to start considering a arena approach as a regional level.
Well, I will say that maybe a little more than a year ago, Contract Cities put together a draft resolution that Senator Allen was ready to carry that would in fact allow the creation of a trust wherein not only the dollars would be contributed and divided, but it would also allocate RENA based on some formula to be determined. Unfortunately, it never made it very far. And it didn't look like there was a lot of, and that was no fault of Senator Allen's, but maybe it's time to revisit that, but we did try just a couple of years ago and nobody was interested. It was most of the arguments against it were the arguments you've heard in the past, why allocate that kind of housing to one area? It's not fair, yada, yada, yada. So that was, yeah. Yes, sir.
Jeff Kiernan with the League of California Cities. Just wanted to make a couple points. SB 20 currently in the legislature would allow cities, 2 or more agencies to create a JPA without special legislation. That's something you may want to consider supporting as a COG. And also just yesterday, I was in a meeting with Santa Monica, South Bay city managers, where they are currently working through how to form their JPA. They were successful in getting legislation through the legislature last year that gave them the right to form one. So just a couple things to think about.
Right, so we need state help with that. Anybody listening needs state help with that. Okay, you guys all good on this side? I'll go this way.
Thank you.
All right, move to the, yeah.
I think that it would be good to explore this and get more information. There were big questions that were asked. At what point when you come back would we, as a COG and individual cities, be able to give input on the future of how this is distributed? I understand the RENA question was really great, but what control would we have as a COG in decision making as far as we put this money in? What if the affordable housing just wants to be built in one city versus another? How do we then divide that? And can we make decisions on that end once it's further along?
Yeah, I think that's part of one of our visions with the uniform zoning, allowing for certain types of affordable housing development within certain zones throughout the sub-region is something that will help facilitate that more equitable distribution of affordable housing development, where right now some places are much more restricted than others in terms of allowable zoning. So that will help, provide that equitable distribution to your point. And so the next step would be to look into what the process would be for how this should be designed. Right, and that's not part of our specific project and our task here, is this to be our 2.0 project potentially. So that's something for us to consider and potentially us or another consulting firm to take on and facilitate with you all.
Thank you. Yeah, board member Stein, if I may. So if the board were to direct us to move forward on exploring it, that's what we do. We would look at the 2.0 funds that we're receiving as a COG, make a proposal to retain a consultant, and we design a funding program and management approach, which this COG would then have to approve and facilitate the coordination of a JPA that needs legislation, working with our delegation, about the staffing plan, policy and procedures. All of that can be funded out of 2.0 funds that are being available. Got it. Thank you.
You good? You good? Okay, anybody in the Zoom world?
Yeah.
Oh, we do.
We do. Yeah.
Oh, that's next one.
Sorry.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yes, we do have a public comment on the site.
Well, let me just finish. So I'm supportive of this idea. What is a study like this cost? And we certainly have money from the REIT funds to cover it. And what kind of timeline would it take to get it done? And what is the cost of actually creating it, something that whatever the program is, we agree to?
It just depends on the scope and the length of COG that speak from to help facilitate. I can't really speak to the specifics of the time because we're not, I think, far along.
The other costs have used REAP 1.0 funds to do this same exact work so that can require. And the REAP 2.0 application just released this week. And you need to put together a scope of work by end of May. And we have $330,000 allocated to the COG.
Okay, and is that $330,000? Great, okay. Well then, certainly I support this, certainly to move forward and see what it would look like. We can define the devil in the details to be determined. I heard we had a public comment. Or somebody down there. Did I miss something?
Public comment?
Comment, please.
Good afternoon, WSI Council of Governments and our local representatives. Good to see you here. I'm honored to be here. I would like to know if any thought has been given to studying land safety and some strategies as far as acquiring funding from hedge funds, the state surplus, and maybe some other funding like from the California Endowment or venture capitalists, what type of funding is actually permissible? And I'd like to know if there's a way to get federal zoning status or state zone status, such as the old enterprise zones and empowerment zones, but getting them all, getting an overlay for all 88 cities of Los Angeles County. Is there a way that we can work on doing this and getting it expedited? I'd also like to know if there's a way to get the FAA to release control of the Santa Monica Airport, because that's pure bedrock. It's the only bedrock Santa Monica has. And here in Colton, we don't have as much because we have a great liquefaction zone here. We'd like to know if there's a way that we can get permission to build on that 144 acres, but we need a release before 2028, so soil analysis can be done. Is that something that we can actually look into?
So there are a lot of questions there. I don't know that we have all of those answers today, but we'll ask staff to research the ones and come back at our next meeting and we can address those. Or if you leave your contact information, we'll be in touch that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, so I think we have consensus around this issue and a plan to move it forward. Lauren would like a motion. Hi, Lauren. All right, I'd entertain a motion. I hear a so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Roll call, please.
Beverly Hills,
Yes.
Culver City,
Aye.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
and West Hollywood.
Aye.
Great, thank you. We're gonna move on to item number D, and I guess letter D. This is a continuation of a discussion that we started at our last meeting. And I'm gonna turn it to Cecilia or Winnie to prep us for it.
Yeah, I'll just start and then turn it over to Winnie. You may recall at our last meeting, we discussed the new allocation of funding coming from Los Angeles County Homelessness Initiative. And there is a funding application made available to COG, quite a bit of an increase over the previous years. This board sent us off with direction to divide up the fund equally. There was a discussion with the county representative, only who's on the line, about whether we would be able to do that. And so a lot has happened since then. There have been numerous discussions within the county, the city, and others elsewhere. So I'm going to turn it over to Winnie to bring us up to speed.
I'm going to provide a very brief overview and really highlight some of the funding recommendations that we're providing. As we mentioned at the last meeting, the Local Solutions Fund is going to be a multi-year funding agreement for the cause, which is great, because we've been receiving funds on a regular basis. This will allow us to have an opportunity to fund longer-term projects. So the funds will be available starting this year through 2027. Eligible cities include Beverly Hills, Culver City, Santa Monica, and West Hollywood. Therefore, excluding the city and county of Los Angeles in this funding allocation. Next slide. So just to recap on the funding allocation, last fiscal year we received $900,000 from the city, the county on innovation funds, which was previously distributed among the 4 cities equally to cover rental assistance and housing and outreach related services. There is also new funding coming. It's an optional prorated amount for Measure H for Q4, the fourth quarter of this fiscal year. It's going to be 1.25 distributed among the entire COGS, and our portion of that amount is $124,000. And then our local solution fund allocation, which is distributed and allocated by the county based on point in time or count, is around 1.4 million out of the 50 million that is being allocated for this fiscal year. Next slide. So for the first available amount of funding for an optional to for prorated amount. We staff recommend that we allocate this full amount towards the West Side Regional Behavioral Health Center feasibility study, which was part of the work plan that was adopted back by the board back in December of 2022. Now for the local solutions fund at 1.4 million just for this fiscal year, we provided several recommendation options for the board to consider and approve today. One is equal distribution, which we have done previously with the innovations fund. Or the second funding option is a methodology that the county is currently using to divide all the funds to the COGs. And I'll relay that information shortly. And then lastly, we can pull our funds together on a regional program, such as a regional winter shelter and or leverage state funds, such as a regional housing trust. Next slide. So this is the first recommendation of equal distribution of the 1.4 million. If we were to divide equally again among 4 cities, each city will receive around $373,000. Next slide. Now the second recommendation is twofold. The first is to create a baseline funding amount using what the county has called a 10% stop loss policy, which basically means that each COG or city is subject to no more than 10% reduction in its shares of funds from the prior fiscal year. So in the second column, you see that based on last year's innovations fund, if we took 10% of that as a baseline, each city will start out with $202,000, and we will distribute the remaining funding amount for Rural Solution Fund based on an average hit count using 2020 and 2022 homelessness count numbers. And you can see at the end the amount distribution based on each city differs. Next slide. This is a bit small, hopefully everyone can see. And we worked with the cities to identify how they would program funds. And here's a list, as you can see, it covers mostly outreach related services, housing support, and preventative care. And each of the funding options would result in different amount of people being served under each funding option. Next slide. And the one back. Yes. And the third option is to pull our research together in regional plans. There's currently not a regional winter shelter in spot 5. And the winter shelter basically covers the months of November through March. And this recommendation would be to lease a site within the west side for all of our cities to access and really rely on MASA to provide the operation and case management services. The second option that we could potentially pull together resources is leveraging state funds as the Northwest has presented. This is something that the Gateway Cities COG is looking to do with the Local Solutions Fund, is taking their funds to apply for the state local housing trust fund in order to get a match of another $5 million. So that would increase their local solution fund to about 10 million. So that's a potential strategy. And then the last slide is basically a summary of and a comparison of all the funding options. So we asked the board to consider the first action is to allocate the Q4 prorated amount of $124,000 to a regional behavioral health center feasibility study, and then discuss amongst the 3 funding options for the local solutions funds for this fiscal year. And we also have Elaine Williams from County Homeless Initiative on Zoom if there are any questions to ask the county.
Great, thank you. So let's just do what's probably the easier one first. The prorated funds, the 124,000. Any comments about that, or we're okay just dividing that equally? Any comments? If not, I'll take a motion. So moved. Okay, Andrew. Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Wales,
Yes.
Culver City.
Aye.
Santa Monica,
Yes.
West Hollywood.
Okay. The second one, the Local Solutions Fund, this is, we started this last time, we to divide it equally. This is what it looks like divided equally in the intervening time. There's been some conversation about doing something different. So I guess the first question is there any interest in doing something different? Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, staff, for bringing these different options. As all the numbers and all the data show, Santa Monica really is in a really hard position in regards to the amount of services that we need to provide to support our homeless population. And I think Culver City and Santa Monica are two cities here that have declared a state of emergency around homelessness. The situation has worsened throughout the months. Santa Monica's being a part of the WSCCOG allows for the allocation that we see from the county based on the point in time methodology. And so one thing that we would like to support is recommendation number 2, which is sort of a hybrid, because if it was just based on the point in time allocation, Santa Monica would be getting about $1 million. On this, with this hybrid proposal, we would be getting about over 665,000 based on this data here, which will allow us to provide services, in areas of critical need right now in our city. So we wanted to advocate for that. I know there have been a series of discussions between city managers around this issue. I personally want us to do more investments on a regional level, and all this sort of what we just did with the behavioral center. But right now, for this year's allocation, I think it would just be prudent and it would be more equitable for us to do it in this manner, right, with option number 2. And we would appreciate the support of everyone to do that this way. I don't know if Jesse, you want to say anything else?
No, just that we I know as a body, our job is to come together and put forward solutions to big regional problems. In this case, we're talking about homelessness. And sometimes that problem is distributed widely throughout the region and requires an approach that's tailored to that. And sometimes, as is the case here, the vast majority of people who are experiencing homelessness live in Santa Monica. We've seen other versions of this on this body where this body came together to support West Hollywood and allocating metro funds to the extension of the K line, based on the fact that they had a particular need that we were willing to all get behind. In this case, dividing this evenly is not, in my mind, an attempt to solve the problem, which is to get help to those who are most in need. It's instead trying to each get as much resources as we can as a city, which is understandable. But as a body task is finding solutions to address it and get resources to those who are most in need. I do believe that recommendation 2 strikes a good balance between making sure that every city is taken care of and doesn't experience a loss in funding, while at the same time recognizing that the county is looking for a data-driven methodology that would support this funding.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving point to Culver City.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that the county is stepping up and going to distribute some of the money. I looked at our sales tax data, and Culver City is contributing to our sales tax collection and $5 million, a little more per year to propositioning. And so, we basically put in $25 million now in the system. So we really appreciate that the county is starting some kind of return, even if it's just a small portion of what we really contribute. That said, I was part of supporting it splitting in equal last time. I think that the amount is not dramatically big. I know that in our budget that we're gonna vote on later this year, it looks like we're gonna end up with somewhere around $10 million, $11 million out of general fund money to run our different initiatives, the home key program, our safe sleeping, camping, and hotel. I know it's for me. I think that if we wouldn't go with option one, which I voted for the last time, and I don't really see any reason to change that, I would go for option 3 because I think we saw this year that the lack of winter shelter and also the lack of having something that we could allocate our homeless people became a real problem for us. And I think that for me, option 3 would be instant if we looked at it to bank the money for a year and then add on money next year and then go for state matching, and then maybe we can really do some real work with the regional winter shelter. But for now, I'm sticking to what I felt was correct the last time.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate Santa Monica's position, and I can understand why you would be advocating for that. I am definitely still interested in option 1. We made a decision. We've done this year after year. We also contributed $5 million through our tax money as well. So while I understand equity can work in other ways that aren't in this second funding criteria, the allocation methodology, which could have included how much tax money went from each city, that it's not. And honestly, how big are our cities? That is another factor. Our city is 1.9 square miles. Beverly Hills is also large in a different way. Santa Monica is large in a different way. Culver City, there's a lot of factors in the second methodology that I don't think create a fair outcome. And for me, the fairest, most equitable way of dividing this is equally and sticking to our prior decision that we made. So I'm still backing recommendation 1.
Thank you. I would also appreciate the county for releasing the money. I think it's really important. I think each of our budgets this year will be significantly impacted by services we're going to provide for the unhoused in a variety of different ways, some of them medical, some of them in housing, some of them in other forms of support. And I think that each of our cities is going to struggle to find a way to afford this. I also think that the history of COG, although I appreciate the conversation about the metro a little bit different because, you know, I don't know that at the time they were thinking about putting the subway through Culver City. But I think the COG by its nature has always, so when it started, obviously metro was a big thing and it took a lot to bring 4 cities that were pretty fiercely independent together to cede control over some part of their governmental function to a new entity, this COG. I think that actually took a leap of faith. And I think the COG has actually supported that leap of faith over the years because we've always really just divided things pretty equally. Everybody's kind of the same, different, but the same. I think that works best here. I don't think that this is an opportunity to change that. And although I'm sympathetic and I certainly understand the problems that Santa Monica has, I would also stick with option number 1. Is there anybody we haven't heard from? I just want to make sure that anybody who wants to be heard on this subject, we can go around again. But I would just want to make sure that if there's somebody on Zoom or in the audience we've not heard from, first Zoom, and then we'll take public comment. Nobody on Zoom. Yes, ma'am.
Council. Can you hear me? Go ahead. Good afternoon again. I forgot to get my name before, Denise Neal. I was listening and heard someone say something about doing some things a little differently. Well, in considering the regional solutions, because we no longer have armory access and things like that, and it really wasn't adequate in the first place. I was wondering if Santa Monica specifically could consider using the Civic Center grounds to create some type of a temporary regional shelter / emergency management grounds. And I was wondering if the Office of Emergency Management, the Department of Transportation, and who's that? I forget the third one, but I wonder, oh yeah, I forget. There were 3 entities that I was thinking of. I wanted to know if an urban nomad program could be created, because we know that we can help the people who want to be housed who are homeless, but there are still several that have made a conscious decision to be homeless, but they still need resources. Now, I was thinking that an urban nomad program with emergency management capabilities would be appropriate, because Santa Monica is isolated and nobody's coming from Santa Monica. There's a quake or tsunami, and the Civic Center still falls under the tsunami zone. So as far as air rights, maybe it can be built up high enough to be a safe place for that area for people to go to. Enough people for the homeless population and the locals and visitors. And maybe you can work together with RAND to do the studies, to assess needs, and do a triage program to where you can identify who needs what services and then target the services appropriately.
Thank you for your comments. I think certainly the folks from Santa Monica have taken note. You can address that to them afterwards. Okay, thank you. Okay, did I see your hand go up, sir? Yes, just.
Yeah, just, I was hoping to ask a question of the county. I heard there was a representative of the line. I read in the staff report that the county provided feedback that indicated that there was insufficient data to support the funding allocation methodology for Division 1, and I was hoping that they could elaborate on that.
Sure.
Hey, good afternoon there, everyone. Thank you for having me. One Williams III with the County Homeless Initiative team there. I just want to say I sincerely appreciate the conversation and even some of the uncomfortableness of it. And to me, that means that as partners, this situation of folks experiencing homelessness is elevated amongst our community, amongst our leaders, amongst our city administrators. So again, I appreciate the conversation. In terms of the methodology of the allocation, the county does take into account at this particular time the 2020 and 2022 homeless count, or the PIT count. That actually, we accumulate that from the member cities to have a regional allocation, and that's how we derive at that number. That in its own sense doesn't necessarily mean that each city gets an equal portion of that, nor does that mean each city gets necessarily its allocation of what it came out to. We do look for a regional approach. However, we do, strongly emphasize that the allocation does address the need where the need is at, and who is going to be housed with that need. At the end of the day, we need to connect people to services and to housing. And so hopefully that answered a little bit of that question there.
Well, I'm going to take from that answer that we're free to do as the COG wants to do.
Our strategy, so in all transparency, our strategy as partners are to partner with the COG and with the cities. As a result of the Blue Ribbon Commission, we heard the cities loud and clear that they do want more funding. As you can see, there's an increase of, I think, a little bit over 50% this particular year in the allocation. And we give the strategy is to first work through the COGs so that they can work with their member cities to program the funds. There is an option to obviously work with cities that don't have a COG. And there is an option where there are unique situations where cities can maybe want to work with the county directly in terms of programming funds for their services and programs.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. So I'm going to, I think that our next step, as I heard it, try again. It sounds like the option that's on the floor at the moment for the allocation here is to divide the money equally. And so I will entertain a motion for that again. And
So
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Do we have a roll call, please?
I'm not sure, I wanna just. Out of the city of Santa Monica, and we look forward to working on regional solutions, sort of what was brought forward with recommendation number 3, assuming the motion passes, that we can revisit this concept, you know, for the future. We can find ways that we can collaborate on something like a regional program that can benefit all of us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Roll call?
Reynolds,
Yes.
Golden State,
Aye.
Santa Monica,
Abstain.
and West Hollywood.
I,
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
I have to say absolutely, as I said, option 3 for me was alternative, and I think we need to figure out. We had a presentation with our Orange County that was a concept that seems to be very interesting, and we have a couple of things that are bigger than any of our cities, right? So our cities are all on that and moving forward. Next meeting, following meetings as well. I think that's a discussion we need to start.
I would absolutely support that also. I think that we have a year now to think about the next tranche that's going to come from Measure H money. And it offers us time to see if there are regional. We had some conversations around regional approaches. They didn't seem to go anywhere. I know Culver City had already started theirs. It was moving along. You guys had started yours. And so too for West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. But maybe if we take a step back from that, the year that follows, maybe we can find some way where we can revisit it in a way that makes sense for everybody. So I think it's a great idea.
Chair, hearing all the comments and the spirit of collaboration, I'd like to change my vote from abstention to yes.
Thank you, sir. That's great. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. And I just want to punctuate it and say, I appreciate that. I really do. I think that it's important for the COG to be that way. We're going to be regional, collaborative. So I really do appreciate it.
I also want to say, definitely interested in working out ways that we can work regionally and collaboratively. This is a different situation, but moving forward, there's definitely opportunities for us all to work together.
Fantastic. So we're all in agreement again. That's even better. I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right. Chair, we are now item 4, the executive director's report. We're a little bit past the hour, so I'm not going to linger, but I am going to take this opportunity to say, we assume you've all read everything. We've been quite busy, but I want to underscore the REAP 2.0 application to the point of regional collaboration. Our COG will be receiving $330,000 under REAP 2.0. That is a perfect opportunity for us to try to leverage those sources to explore things like regional housing trust fund, like our mental health facilities. So we will be working to put together a proposal for a flexible fund for the West Side cities to access a bench of consultants for professional technical assistance, for the housing elements, as well as collaborating on regional solutions. And that application is due on May 31st. Sorry, regional trust. All right. Okay. So with that, that concludes my executive director's report.
Next time, make it shorter, please. We did want to introduce some new alternates. I don't know if they're still with us. We see the Vice Mayor of Beverly Hills, Lester Friedman, will be the new alternate, and I don't see Councilmember Hoffman, but there's Councilmember Friedman, Vice Mayor Friedman, and in absentia, we will recognize, appreciate, and welcome Councilmember Hoffman. Okay, is that it?
We have
From Senator Ben Allen's office, you have a brief report.
Good afternoon, I'll do my best to keep it short. So hi, everyone, Jake Ettinger from Senator Ben Allen's office. We proudly represent 3 of the cities here, and I also happen to live in the city of Culver City, so an honorary represent all 4. So I'll just talk a little bit, it's my first time joining you all, and just a bit of some of the legislation the Senator's been working on last year briefly, and a few things that are on the docket this year. And quickly, I'll mention also, as many of you know, the budget for this year, after a few years of a lot of extra money in the state, we're expecting a $22 billion shortfall this year. We'll have an updated budget in May, and the number could be even worse. So unfortunately, not going to have much flexibility with funding. So last year, a few bills that I mentioned are SB 54, the big plastics bill to create a producer responsibility model to reduce our single-use packaging and food service waste by 65% by 2032. Talking about housing, SCA 2 creates a statewide ballot measure that will be on the ballot next year to repeal Article 34, which requires majority approval by voters of the city for the development of publicly funded low-rent housing projects. And lastly, SB 1444, which created the South Bay Regional Housing Trust we discussed earlier. And I did take note to, so I'll let the senator know of the concerns of Beverly Hills and the other cities with regards to the arena numbers. A few pieces of legislation that are currently in the works for this year. So SB 389, we know that we have an ongoing water crisis despite having a lot of rain in the last few months. This would grant the state water board the authority to decide on water rights claims not licensed pre-1914 water rights. We want to make sure that we can ensure that people that had the rights before 1914, we can still go after and make sure that they're not overusing water. Another one would be SB 285, which we work closely with the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce on, which would authorize cannabis consumption lounges and other distributors of legal distributors of cannabis to sell prepackaged goods, non-alcoholic beverages. Right now, they're having to operate restaurants out of their establishments, and this would allow them to obtain more revenue at their establishments. Another running off of what we did with SB 54 last year is SB 615, which would establish an extended producer responsibility program for electric vehicle batteries to make sure that the creators of electric vehicle batteries are making sure that they're either repurposed, reused, or recycled, and not turning into massive hazardous waste. And then one more I'll mention is SB 867, which would place the general obligation bond on the state ballot, which, if approved, would create a funding for $4 billion of drought, wildfire resilience, biodiversity, coastal resilience, park creation, and other climate infrastructure that we need. Thank you. There's a good time. I look forward to doing it in the future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kieran, we keep cutting you from our agenda.
I'm on there. We're on first, but I'm on this after.
No, I know you're on it. I'm thinking about the coffee. Do you have a minute's worth of stuff you want to tell us? I'll give you a minute.
Sure. Let me have you grab one of these each and pass it around. I'll cover it on this first. So
I think you didn't cut.
you covered it on this time. But just to briefly chat, I've got a copy of my report. Unfortunately, it didn't make it to your packet. I was traveling last week. Wanted to mention the 350 people, city officials we had at our City Leaders Summit in Sacramento last week, including a few of the folks here in the room. The colorful packet that I've given you are the materials from that event. We're really trying to work through telling the story of what cities are doing on homelessness and housing to the residents, to the state, to the county. We really do need more adequate funding and sustainable funding. That was one of our big asks. We had a press conference last week in Sacramento that asked the state to provide $3 billion in permanent funding in the budget so that those multi-year projects can get off the ground. Now we have to go hand in hand to the capital every single year. Just to make a mention of a couple other things, the Public Safety Committee yesterday did vote down AB 1708 by Assemblymember Suchi, which would bring back to the voters some adjustments to Proposition 47. They really have not been interested in, we've run this bill essentially twice in the last few years. They've not been interested in doing anything to make changes to Proposition 47. Also, you'll see in some of the news coverage today, that committee had, until yesterday, decided they were not going to pass any of the fentanyl bills out of committee either. There is a bit of a drumbeat on that issue from cities, from all around the state, and they are going to take up have a hearing on that issue next week. Previously, that hearing was supposed to be scheduled for September after the legislature had adjourned for the year. So this is a good adjustment by the chair, and we're certainly happy for that. Also, I will make a quick mention of the LA County divisions did send a letter on the county's decarceration proposal that was proposed by Supervisors Solis and Horvath. We are hoping to have more conversations with the supervisors on that issue before it comes back before the county. Other than that, I will just mention quickly that you've got some legislative deadlines coming up. May 19th is the fiscal deadline in both houses. And then the next big one after that is June the 2nd, which requires all the bills to cross over from their original house to the second. So happy to take questions, but I know you're brief on time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. If you sit there, I'm sure people will come over and ask you questions. Mr. Molina, do you have something brief?
Yes, I'll do it in 1 minute. Our city is, as you well know, and the COG has supported our metro alignment, is working to amend the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District Law, which today you can create if your city so chooses, and that district can last up to 45 years. Federal law, when the infrastructure bill passed bipartisanly, allowed for TIFIA loans to be floated up to 75 years. In order for us to take advantage and align current statute with the federal TIFIA loans, 75 years, we need to modify the EIFBs. We are seeking an author right now. We have what's called an AMBAC bill or RN, which is basically a bill without an author. And we've been working very collaboratively with Supervisor Horvath, who has been amazing. He has been making phone calls on our behalf. I know that some of you have not only supported our project, but also have ideas or possibilities of creating EIFIDs in that term. And the term, as you know, when it's longer, your payment is lower and you have more time to collect funds to repay your debt. So if we have an author, which we hope so, the Speaker's office has committed to helping us with this, we will be coming back to you to help support the bill, and that's my report. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Any member of the public like to address us on matters, on any matters? Two more, we'll give you 2 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon. Is this considered public comment?
It is public comment.
Okay. I'm going to try to keep it to 3 points and be very succinct. I once served as a sworn commissioner in Santa Monica, and I predicted that when we were building the train, this is 12 years ago, that it would become a direct pipeline from Skid Row to the beach. And it happened. I wanted to know if, because homeless tend to travel to the ends of the train lines, if we can put some regional hubs, like little hubs, at 7 of the crucial strategic points along train lines, because homeless people travel. And they usually don't get off of their modes of transportation till they get to the end. Now, we need some funding, and we're gonna need the other states that are sending their homeless here on one-way tickets, as was told to me by bus drivers. We're gonna need those states to relinquish funding to take care of those people they sent here. That's part of why we have so many here. I'm wondering if you're willing to look at the possibility of creating those strategic hubs, at least 7, in those key places. And the global strategist of Manchester Bidwell, Joanna Papado, would like to do a
You have one more minute.
Okay, well, Joanna Papado, the global strategist from Manchester Bidwell in Pennsylvania, would like to do a Zoom meeting with us to help us strategically lay out and put to work our people, even some of the homeless people, to build some of these things we're trying to achieve. She wants to know that and resources and the people who want to work to help build it. Is that possible? Can we do a Zoom with Joanna Papado from Manchester Bidwell? They're successful. They've been successful in many places, but she's trying to help us with post-pandemic rebuilding. If we can talk about that.
Thank you. I don't know the answer to that. But Cecilia will give you her contact. And if this lady has an ability to email her, we can get more information and consider it.
She does, and she will.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Are there any, do we have any written comment, Riley?
No.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to say? Going once. Going twice. All right, we will adjourn then to our next meeting, which is June 8th, 2023. And it'll be West Hollywood. Thank you all, and we appreciate your time.